Hi everyone, this is OCD Live. I'm Ali Graymond, and let's get to some questions. The first question I have is about exposures. The question is, would I recommend doing planned exposures or just letting triggers come up naturally? I would say that it depends on your specific situation. If you feel like you're strong enough to do both planned and unplanned exposures, that's always better because the more exposure you have to a certain situation when you react correctly, the faster your brain recovers. So, for example, if you're afraid of driving, right? And you're only, because you're afraid like every time you drive, you feel like you hit somebody. So you only drive when you need to drive, such as when you're going to work or whatever. In this case, if you're doing planned exposures on top of it, you're going to recover a lot faster because you're going out for a drive, but at the same time, if you're going out for a drive, as an example, right, and you are panicking afterwards and doing reassurance and all of that, you're actually making yourself worse. So it's not, it is the quantity of the exposures, but it's also the quality. And if you don't think that you can handle doing more, like doing planned and unplanned exposures, then I would say kind of just do the unplanned ones because obviously you can't avoid those. And then do planned ones when you feel strong enough because it's a lot better. Well, it's not even that it's a lot better, but if for example you are doing a planned exposure and you continuously fail at it, you're not doing it right, and then you do the reassurance, you're making yourself worse. So in that way, you are actually making the situation worse, not better. So it's better to do a higher quality with less exposures than to do a lower quality with more exposures, if that makes sense. And if you're listening to my talks for the first time, basically, you kind of have to listen to my other videos to know what I'm talking about. But basically, every time you're exposed to the situation that you fear, your brain is really taking notice of what you're going to do. If you're going to pay attention to it and react with fear, then your brain is going to say, okay, this is important, I'm going to send more of these thoughts. If you react without fear, then it's going to send less thoughts, but you do need to do an exposure. So I would say that definitely, if you feel like you're strong enough, of course, planned exposures is the best plan. Like in addition to natural exposures or accidental exposures, as we call them. But if you can't handle it, then just take it easy and focus on the quality. So the next question I have is about rumination. And the person asks, would it help to set a specific amount of time every day, so say 30 or 40 minutes, for thinking about the OCD thought and then continuously cut it down until you reduce all of the rumination? And rumination just means going back to the situation, thinking about it, trying to figure it out. I would say definitely it would help if you, obviously, it's very difficult to eliminate analyzing completely, especially in the beginning. So if you are having more of a pure out type of OCD where you're thinking a lot about the thoughts, trying to make sense out of them and things like that, at least doing it for a certain amount of time, so in this example, 30 to 40 minutes, it gives you kind of a stop point where, okay, I'm not going to think anymore. And when you do that, when you say to your mind, I've already thought about this enough today, I'm choosing not to think anymore, your mind takes it to mean that the situation is not as important, which is great in terms of recovery. And then as you cut it down, yes, that I would say that this is a really good idea. If you can, I mean, it's better not to think about it at all, because every day, every time you think about your OCD, you're really progressing your disorder. So because your brain is learning every time that it's relevant and it's going to send you more thoughts. So, but if, we don't live in a perfect world, and OCD is hard to get over, especially if those patterns have been ingrained for some time. So I would say that, yeah, definitely setting up a time really helps. So the next question I have, the person is asking, they're saying that they have OCD behaviors, and they definitely have OCD, but they also have other behaviors that are similar to OCD, or maybe not even that similar, but they're also kind of behaviors that they do that they're like different, but they're not sure if it's OCD or not. So I would say that if you're in that situation and you're trying to classify something as OCD or not, really think about, does it feel like OCD? Is it not something you want to do? Is it something you feel like you have to do? Is it something that is kind of added onto you rather than you taking control of it? Like, do you feel like it's a weight on your shoulders? Because, okay, so say for example, like just to make it clear, say there's two people, okay? Those two people are both have cleaning kind of compulsions. One person cleans for 10 hours a day, another person cleans for 10 hours a day. One is very bothered by the cleaning, gets very anxious, very upset about it, and really wants to stop but doesn't know how to. It doesn't make them feel good. The other one cleans for 10 hours a day as well, but they like it, they feel good about it, they don't view it as a problem, it doesn't create an issue in their lives. If other people are messing up with their cleaning, they're just going to clean again. It doesn't create a big issue. This is the difference between people with OCD and people without OCD. People with OCD are very bothered by it. They want it to stop, but they can't make it stop. The person without OCD doesn't see anything wrong with it, and if they don't see anything wrong with it, if it's not bothering them, then it is just a quirky habit kind of a situation. So, because we all do things that are kind of patterns and habits, and some of us, like in the example I gave you, some of us clean more, some of us clean less, some of us have other odd behaviors, and some of us don't. But it's when you find that it becomes painful and hard to live with, but you can't stop, and it becomes you have to have high anxiety to have OCD. If you don't have high anxiety about it, you don't have OCD. But if it comes with anxiety, if it's something that you're spending a lot of your life worrying about, and if it's something that you actually want to stop but can't because of fears, because of what if thoughts and things like that, then it sounds like OCD to me. But I would say that if you're questioning as OCD, it's a good chance that it could be OCD. There's also another thing where usually, again, from talking to so many people, I find that most people have a primary OCD thought, which is their main obsession, and they do main compulsions to counteract the obsession. And then they have a secondary issue that it's not so severe, but it's still there. So if they get rid of the first one, the second one can really overtake the first one. So there is that happening as well. So I'm not sure if that's the case with you, but I'm just kind of giving you all of the scenarios, and then you can judge for yourself where you are with that. So another question I have, and this is actually a very common question, so there's nothing to be embarrassed about, but if you have a sexually based OCD thoughts, what if you get aroused? This is a question I get asked a lot. Does it mean anything? It doesn't mean anything. The only thing it means is that the mind takes it seriously. Why does it take it seriously? Because you've been repeating the same thing and reacting with fear. So because the mind controls, obviously not just your thoughts, but your entire body, it can come up with all kinds of symptoms. The arousal is just one of the symptoms that it can come up with. People throw up, people feel physically ill. It's any kind of symptom that has to do with your OCD, depending on what your OCD thought is, because the mind has learned that it's real, and it's giving you all of the signals and signs that it's as if it's real, because it's learned that. And the way it learned that is by you reacting the wrong way. You start reacting the correct way by not paying attention to the thoughts, even though you have these physical symptoms. That you start to react correctly, and then the thoughts will go away and the physical symptoms will go away, because there's nothing really backing them up. It's not who you are and all of this stuff. It's just that your mind has learned an incorrect pattern, and it's now operating your body kind of like, almost if you think like of a way like how a computer operates a robot. That's exactly what's happening here, that the mind is operating the body on the assumption that these thoughts are true, important, relevant, all this stuff, when they're not. So it's just operating under the wrong programming. It's very common, nothing to be worried about. I know it's kind of a sensitive subject, but there's really nothing to it. So you have to, as much as possible, try not to pay attention to it. And I know it's difficult when it's actually physical symptoms, but they mean as little as the feelings you are getting when you're getting these thoughts. The feelings, what if it's real, what if the physical symptoms are just the same. It's just a big lie, and you can stop it by choosing not to react despite having them. So the next question I have, is it normal that the anxiety levels go very, very high when you're stopping compulsions and that it can last for some weeks? Yes, it is very common. What's happening here is when you're stopping your compulsions, your brain basically, it's the same for your brain as if you're crossing the street on the red light. Your brain is basically in shock. You taught it that this thing, whatever it is extremely important to you. It's very dangerous. Absolutely have to avoid, get reassurance, all of this. And now you're saying, oh no, I'm not going to do reassurance. I'm not going to do avoidance. I'm not going to do compulsions. I'm just not going to do it anymore. So the brain thinks, oh my God, this person is in danger, you know? So it's going to bring the anxiety high in order for you to react how you were reacting before, with a lot of fear, because your brain actually likes that you react with a lot of fear, because fear means safety. If you're in fear, you're protecting yourself. If you're protecting yourself, obviously you're staying safe, which is the function of the brain to begin with, is to keep you safe. That function, the reason why you're having these thoughts is because the brain thinks you're in danger and it's trying to keep you safe. So of course it's going to want you to feel the anxiety. So very normal. And if you're, just like I said, if you're going against the grain basically and refusing all compulsions, mental and physical, or just physical, if you refuse any compulsion, it's going to get high. But if you're refusing most of them, it's going to get very high. So if you're refusing them, it is going to try to rebel for a while. And you're right, it is going to take a few, it depends. Some people take weeks, some people take a month, some people take maybe just like a few days to up to a week. It depends how long the person had the thought before, and also how strongly they're resisting compulsions. But because there is a physical, it's called like a brain pattern, where they can actually see it on like medical devices when they scan the brain, how the brain pattern goes. So it's basically like if you think of a ping pong ball, right? If you hit it at a certain angle, where is it going to go? Same thing with this. When you have this thought, how is it going to travel around your brain? So there's actually physical symptoms that are physical processes that are taking place of how the brain is reacting. And that doesn't get fixed in just one time of doing exposure and then refusing to do compulsions. It takes a few times, and by a few I would say probably to see progress, you would need to do it at least 5-6 times, I would say, at least, because you've done it so many times before the wrong way. So you need to prove it at least a few times. After doing it just one time, your brain is not even going to take it seriously. But if you do it a few times and the brain sees, okay, this person has refused to do the compulsions a few times, yet they're still alive, nothing is wrong, and then the brain starts to understand that it's not relevant anymore, and it stops sending you the thoughts. But in the beginning, it is very high, and yes, it can last a little while before it starts to go down. So yeah, don't get discouraged. It takes time. It doesn't take too long, and most of my clients are actually surprised of how fast they start to recover when they're doing the right things. But there's still a time element involved, because you've been teaching the wrong things for some time, and it's not like, I'm not saying like you, but all of us. When I had OCD, I was teaching my brain the wrong things for a long time, and that's why it took a while to recover, because the brain learns these techniques. And that's why I always say that it would be great if they taught this in schools, that if you get intrusive thoughts, if you get OCD thoughts, and by the way, intrusive thoughts and OCD thoughts are like part of the same thing. It's, if you have OCD, you have intrusive thoughts that are intruding on your life, because people ask me all the time, what's the difference between the two? So when you're having these thoughts that are bothering you, if you learn from the very beginning how to take care of them, that you need to not pay attention to them and they go away, then they never develop into a full-blown OCD. So, but unfortunately, we're not taught that, and that's why, a lot of the people get into the situation with OCDs, because it just gets out of control. So I hope today has helped you guys. You guys, please ask me questions. I know last week I didn't do a show. I was really, really busy. And but this week I'm doing a show, obviously now, and then next week I will as well. So please send me your questions. You can send them to info@youhaveocd.com. If you visit youhaveocd.com, there's a private recovery program that you can do with me. There's also books available for sale. There's free articles there as well. So please check that out. Thank you guys so much. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, and I'll see you next week.